Good evening, everybody. This is the November Plan, reading two more stories from Khmer Legends by Demaz Tep Baker. I hope you guys are having a wonderful evening, and I look forward to putting you guys to sleep here. So this is called The Story of Prohm BaChey, Vat Nakor BaChey. If I am mispronouncing it, let me know. If one travels on Route 7 from Phnom Penh to the province of Kampong Cham at approximately 3 kilometers from the city, there's a service road on the left leading to the remaining gates of an old monument built of brown sandstone. The gates were broken, torn by time and neglect, possibly by many wars that took place over the centuries. This monument is called Vat Nakor BaChey, or Vat Nakor, or Temple BaChey. Once inside the compound, you would find two more sets of broken gates made of the same sandstone, all having entrances facing north, south, east, and west. In the middle of the inner gates, a big platform of 15 meters by 15 meters was erected in the form of a stupa, a sacred Buddhist construction that used to hold ashes of deceased parents, relatives, and other family members. It has 4 open doors. In the middle of each of them stood a stone Buddha serenely facing the 4 directions. At the outer gates between the entrance 3 and 4, 1 or 2 small Buddhist temples were also built. On the south side, one of the temples also housed 4 small Buddhas, also facing the 4 directions. The story goes like this. Once upon a time, a powerful king called Snatgran, King Gran, was searching for a place to settle and build his palace. On his long journey, escorted by his high-ranking administrators, his many concubines, his retinue, his soldiers, and his servants, he came upon a small river that flowed into the big one, which became the Mingkok River later, in the province of Kampong Cham. He ordered his people to erect camps that were there for more exploration. The river was full of fish of all kinds. At the monsoon season, the overflowing Mingkok River spread its bounty to the smaller rivers, which overflowed and created good soil for the people who lived off the river. The fertilized banks became the farmland for growing all kinds of edible vegetables and fruit. Everything seemed to grow wild. During the harvest season, people from as far as 5 miles around gathered in their multicolored clothing to harvest the fruit of their labor, or to barter their produce for food they didn't have. The annual harvest was also the time when young men and young women met one another, flirted with one another, and made their matrimonial choices. There were also games, songs, and dancing everywhere from sunrise to sundown. Further away inside the city, there were also plenty of valuable trees such as the teak or teak, koki, and granghun, a black precious tree, to cut and use for building a city. The perfect weather all year round also added to the desirability of the area. The king decided to make this place his kingdom. However, the river belonged to a very nice young woman named Ning Bao, who made her living from the fish she and her people caught from that river. Upon learning that a king had arrived and decided to stay, she instructed her 102 servants to prepare plenty of food and abundant desserts, and to pick different kinds of fruit from her orchards as offerings to the king. The next day, a procession of beautiful girls in their most colorful silk clothing and jewelry carried silver trays full of foods, flowers, and fruit through the pathways to the king's camps. These girls also dressed up in white embroidered silk skirts called samputs. Their arms and ankles, encased in glittering gold and silver ornaments, looked like apsaras, celestial angels from heaven. The procession was headed by Ningpo. She herself carried a special silver tray of white lilies for the king. At the entrance to the camps, she was greeted by the king's guards and high-ranking officials who took her straight to the king's quarters. The king was very pleased to see that he and his people were so handsomely welcomed to this area. Not only was he impressed by her generosity, but also by her beauty, her gracefulness, and her youth. Her radiant smile, her long wavy black hair coming down to the waist, and her young firm body molded by a red silk sumput had instantly captured his heart. After the offering ceremony, Ningbo bowed before the king and bid him goodbye to return to her house. To her delight, the king promised to see more of her in the coming days. From then on, every day the king and a small group of his entourage went to visit Ningbo. Sometimes he stayed for dinner at her request. Their relationship flourished. As the days went by, he fell more and more in love with Ningbo, and through a go-between, he asked her to marry him. They were married soon after with pomp and fanfare, attended by many other kings and their queens, their soldiers, and their servants from neighboring provinces. The celebration lasted a week, with all kinds of activities. Food and drink were plentiful for everyone. After the festivities had died down, the king, who was so much in love with his new wife, ordered a monument protected by 3 layers of gates in pink sandstone to be built in her honor. 2 years later, the culmination of their happiness was fulfilled by the arrival of a boy. The king's happiness knew no bounds. He showered his son with gifts, toys, and best of all, with love. The young prince grew up in a household full of games and with affection from both parents. He was full of perk and energy and possessed a good sense of curiosity for a boy his age. In brief, he was a very intelligent young boy, questioning everything that came his way. The king said to himself, "My son is very smart. I have to find him good tutors for higher education." In the old days, the only place to get a good education was in the faraway country of China. So, when the young prince reached the age of 8 years old, the king and Ningbo decided that he should go to China for a formal education. With a heavy heart, he ordered his soldiers to build a boat that could carry a number of servants, soldiers, his son, and an ample supply of food to last several months until his son reached China. The day came to say goodbye to his son. Both he and Ningbo, tears running down their cheeks, held their son tight for a moment in their arms. The king then said, "Son, go to China, learn as much as you can, and bring that knowledge back to our homeland. Goodbye, my son." The young prince was a brave prince. Without shedding a tear, he promised his father he would come back and take over his reign. He did not know that he would never see his father again, and the latter died a few years later of sorrow and illness. The prince's mother, Ningbo, left the palace and went back to her home near the river. A new king had moved the kingdom to another area of Kampong called Prohm. In China, the young prince learned everything required to govern a kingdom, including military skills, philosophy, and astrology. His sharp intelligence had won the hearts of high-ranking Chinese officials who expressed their desire to keep him in China. They spread rumors that his parents had died and that it would be pointless to go back. When the prince reached the age of 18, he was offered a prestigious position with the Chinese government. While working for the Chinese, he never stopped studying. After meetings, he always went to the best academy library to learn more, to do more research on the specific details of any particular project. His skills in the military field, his outlook in philosophy, and his acute sense in astrology had gained him the Chinese name of Sambaf Kong, or the man of great 3 skills. Sam means 3. His reputation had spread throughout China. He was well liked, admired, and respected by all the Chinese. One day he went to the emperor and asked permission to spend time in the countryside with the people so he could learn more about them, about their needs, their aspirations, and what the government could do to improve their lives. Permission granted, he embarked on his long journey for the truth. He declined all offers of escort and did not accept any money for expenditures during the trip. Instead, he disguised himself as an ordinary peasant wearing peasant clothes just to be one of them. He moved from place to place collecting information for his studies, making a simple living as a fortune teller. He did so well that people flocked from everywhere to get their fortune told and paid him generously. His humble disguise had gained him even more respect throughout China. However, the prince, now aged 30, longed to go back to his homeland and to see through his own eyes what his people looked like and what they did, although he did not remember much of his childhood. Again, his disguise as a peasant helped him roam around the countryside without being recognized and to escape from China. For 7 months, he stayed in different places. When he arrived inside Cambodia, he took refuge in a temple where he could learn Cambodian or Khmer, his own language. With zeal and dedication, he was able to speak and read Khmer fluently in record time. He adopted a new name, Prohm. Now that he had grasped the language, he left the temple and moved further inside the country, looking for the place where he was born, Kampong Cham. He arrived at a village and saw an old house at the outskirts of the city. Exhausted from his long journey, he knocked at the door of the old house to see whether he could find a place to rest for the night until the next day. He was pleasantly greeted by a lady of approximately 50 years of age. She looked very beautiful. Her skin was smooth and she had no wrinkles. Her manners showed that she was an upper-class lady. She had a soft voice, and when she invited him in, his heart was pounding with excitement. She ordered her servants to prepare him a room and to offer him some food before he retired for the night after such a long day. The next day, Prohm thanked the lady of the house profusely and stated that he was very delighted to be so welcome. The lady told him she had some business to carry out and she needed a man to help. If he had no other plans in the near future, he was very welcome to stay free of charge. Prohm was overjoyed by the offer and accepted. They lived together as business partners for a while. She taught him business skills he didn't have. Prohm, however, was more and more attracted to the lady in spite of their age difference. She possessed all virtues of a woman he was looking for as a wife: compassion for the poor, honesty, generosity, and, most of all, her gentleness towards him. As time went by, he made new friends. One day, with help from one of his new friends, he asked for her hand in marriage. As mentioned before, the lady had lost all relatives and lived only with a handful of faithful and loyal servants. She was also attracted to Prohm. She accepted his proposal, and shortly thereafter they were married. They were a happily married couple, well liked and respected by everyone in the neighborhood. One day, the memory of her 8-year-old son came back. She felt sad, and knowing her husband had accurate skills for telling fortunes, she asked him to look at the zodiac sign to see what had happened to the son she had sent to China some 30 years ago. Prohm, intrigued by the question, asked her what year she had sent her son and what her husband was doing at the time. She revealed that her husband had been King Srachkran of this province, and she had been his wife. They had a beautiful son, so smart they decided to send him to China for higher education in order to come back and govern the country. She revealed that her husband died a few years later of illness and sadness at the loss of the son they sent away. She added, "Look at this river by our house. That's where my husband, the king, and I used to canoe in the evening as a pastime. We named it Tonle Om, the Cruiser River. The name exists to this day. To her astonishment, she saw Prohm prostrated in front of her, both his hands joined together, tears running down his cheeks. Sadly, he said, "Dear venerable mother, I am the one you sent to China when I was 8 years old. I never for one moment in my life thought my mother was still alive, and never in my wildest dreams imagined that one day I would become her husband. Ooh. I beg your forgiveness for my sins. Please tell me what I should do to be relieved of this shameful sin. I will do anything." The old lady was shocked, astounded, stunned by those words. She herself never thought she would ever see her son again, and, least of all, marry him. Tears ran down her cheeks. She remained speechless for a long moment. It seemed like an eternity. Finally, sobbing uncontrollably, she said, "Oh, my beloved son, what karma has drawn us together in this sinful way? I'm as embarrassed as you are. Here's what I think you should do. When I die, you must bury me in a stupa located at the old palace of Nakor BaChey, which your father had built for me. My coffin must be surrounded by 4 stone Buddhas standing at each corner of the coffin. Then when you die, you must make it known that a stone copy of you in a sitting position on a small platform with your hands joined together must be placed in front of my coffin facing the west, asking forgiveness until the end of the Buddhist calendar year. Only in this way can you be relieved of your sins." Prohm bowed his head to his mother and promised he would fulfill her every wish when the time came. They continued to live together, this time as mother and son. A few years later, the old lady died. Fulfilling his promise, Prohm had a stupa built under which he buried his mother, surrounded by 4 sandstone Buddhas. Later, the people in the community built a temple over the stupa to protect it from the weather. When Prohm in turn died, his students built a sandstone copy of him, with his hands joined and facing his mother's stupa to the west. In China, when Prohm, or Sampav Kong, disappeared without any trace for several years, the Chinese government sent their investigators to look for him. Unfortunately, when they arrived in Kampuchea, the old name for Cambodia, Prohm had just died. In recognition of his great work for China, the Chinese officials ordered that his Chinese name, Sampav Kong, be inscribed in the stone. This monument, along with others built in BaChey, became a tourist attraction in the years to come. Every year during the Chinese New Year and during the memorial month of November, people flock to the temple to pay their respects to Prohm or Sampav Kong. In the Buddhist year of 2070, it was believed that some businessman tried to remove the stone and place it at the entrance of the gate. Consequently, it was said that the whole area was stricken by a mysterious disease, during which time several hundreds died. The legend went to say that Prohm's ghost came to the house of an old lady and told her to move his statue back to the original place. He told her he had to face his mother's coffin for her forgiveness until the end of the Buddhist calendar year. And so they did, and everything went back to normal. Wow, that was a very interesting kind of Oedipus moment there. Son marries his mom. Okay, the next one is called the Crocodile Thon, or Kpo Thon. Thon. Wow, that's my name, my middle name. This story originated at Sampor, a small village in the province of Krat on the Mingkok River. It was told that a young Buddhist monk named Thon raised a crocodile as a pet. For newly ordained monks, the designation of Nin or Ning is affixed to his first name to indicate he is still a novice. Thus, he was called Thon. Later, the crocodile became known as Crocodile Thon, or Khmer Thon. Khmer means crocodile in Cambodian language. The monk was very fond of his pet. Every evening at sunset, he went to the river bank to talk and play with the crocodile. They both enjoyed seeing each other. People who lived in the nearby villages, men, women, children, monks of all ages, used to come to the river for a swim and watch the master and his pet without fear, because the monk had power over his pet. Every evening, the monk firmly reminded the crocodile not to harm anyone. The monk also possessed healing powers as such. He was well respected, well liked, and sought after to restore health to sick people. His reputation spread beyond his hometown. At that time, the capital of Cambodia, or Kampuchea, was located on Ondong on the Basik River. The king who had established his fortress in that town had a lovely young daughter. Suddenly, the princess contracted a mysterious disease and became very ill. Alarmed by this grave illness, he ordered his staff to find the best doctor in the kingdom to cure her. He had heard of Ning Ton's reputation as a healer. He immediately sent for him. In those days, people traveled by small boats. It took several days to travel from Krati to Undan, and the trip was treacherous and fraught with dangers. Between Krati and the village of Chlong on the Mingkok River, there were other fearful crocodiles, cataracts, and sharp rocks which could easily sink small boats and drown the passengers. Even so, the monk arrived safely at the king's palace. He immediately began to apply his healing powers to the little princess. After a few weeks, the princess regained her strength and energy, and her good health had returned. However, fearful that his daughter's illness would reoccur, the king ordered the monk to stay longer. At Krakti, the crocodile very much missed his master, whom he had not seen for several months. Every evening he went to the same spot to look for any sign of his master's return. Full of sadness, he decided to go to Ondong to fetch his beloved monk. Upon his arrival at a place near Chlong called Prohm Sopakal, or Mount Sopakal, he encountered a fierce enemy, a nasty counterpart. The latter, thinking that Crocodile Thon was intruding in this territory, was ready to attack and destroy him. Crocodile Thon, on the other hand, although bigger and more powerful, was in no mood for fighting. He was in a hurry to find his master. Wisely, he avoided the fight, but promised to himself that he would come back one day and deal with this impotent enemy. When he arrived at Undong, he hid himself from the inhabitants living along the river in deep waters. He knew that they would not understand the friendship between a crocodile and a monk. They would certainly be frightened and outraged to see such a large crocodile in the neighborhood. He kept hoping that one day his master would come to the bank of the river to bathe or admire the sunset. Sure enough, one evening the monk came by and sat upon a bamboo raft. Seeing his master, he lifted himself to the surface of the water and swam toward him. The monk delightedly recognized his pet at once. However, without warning, Crocodile Thon quickly decided to take his master home. He smashed the raft with his tail, slid himself under his master, and carried him on his back toward his hometown. After a few days of travel, both Crocodile Thon and the monk arrived at the same spot where the crocodile's enemy lived. At Thon, this was the crocodile's nickname, thought to himself, This crocodile's looking for a fight, but he does not know I am stronger and more powerful than him. He does not know that whoever wants to fight with me must perish. I'm going to teach him a lesson." Then he had a second thought. If I fight him, my master will be in danger. He would be thrown off my back and drown or eaten by my enemy. I must save my master, and the only way to do that is to hide him in my stomach. Having said that, Crocodile Thon swallowed his master whole and attacked his fierce enemy in full force. The fight lasted several hours. Finally, the battle was over. Having successfully killed his opponent, he continued his journey toward Sambor, where he intended to spit up his master as soon as he landed. At his arrival, young children, monks, and people living near the temple gathered to cheer him. They were happy to see him back and were hoping to see the monk also. Thon carried to the sand on the bank of the river and spat up his master. Alas, to his deep sorrow, his master had died several hours ago. The people shouted at him, "What a horrible animal you are! You killed your beloved monk!" Full of regret and sadness, Crocodile Thon moved back into deep waters looking for a place to mourn his master and abate his sorrow. He was very sorry that he had to swallow his master, thus causing his death. He wished he could do something to bring the monk back to life. He said to himself, "I loved my master very much. I did not intend to harm him. If he died, it was not entirely my fault. The cause of my master's death was of the king's daughter. Had she not been ill, my master would have not been called to cure her illness. Therefore, she must be punished." He then disappeared in deep waters again and swam toward Undong with every intention to avenge his master's death. When he arrived, he waited near the bank of the river for the opportunity to seize the princess should she come to take a bath. The story did not say how long he had to wait, but one day the princess indeed went to the river with her retinue and maids. She was enjoying herself with her entourage in the water. Gapun and Thon seized her, swallowed her, and left the area immediately. Needless to say, the king was devastated at the sad news. He ordered all his staff to pursue the crocodile and capture him at all costs. It was believed that he brought with him a seer, a fortune teller, who could tell the exact whereabouts of the crocodile. Gapun and Thon swam all the way to the Laotian border, near a place called the Kung Falls, and back to Krati. Seeing he was intensely searched for in this area, he continued his travel looking for a safer place to hide. He swam through Brechlong, a tributary of the Mingkok River. However, unfortunately, it was there that he was captured and split open to retrieve the princess. Like the monk, alas, the princess was long dead. Her body was brought back to Sambor for a royal cremation. The crocodile Thon was cut into pieces, and his meat was salted and dried for food consumption. The story said that this place was called Vilhal Net, the plain to dry meat. Okay, that's the end of that with the crazy crocodile story. All right, I hope you have a fulfilling evening and a good night. And